As Titan flew by him, she began to head in my direction, retracting her side-mounted blades and sliding to a stop, spinning around back towards the enemy, just close enough for me to catch her, and placing my foot against her armor plating softly, as my personal blade extended, along with the front-mounted shield retracting, so that I could grab it. In that moment, he raised his arm again. I began to notice that whenever he was going to fire, I could see the green light start to flow from the rest of his body to his arm, pulsating stronger. But luckily for me, just as he was about ready to let off a shot, he got hit with one instead. It seemed to completely throw him off balance, sending him a few steps back. If he were a human being, that would have blown him away. But despite the force of the impact, he was still standing, just a scorch mark on his shoulder, as he began to look around for who shot him. But I had no intentions on letting him sift that out. He had other things to focus on. With no hesitation, Titan went in for a second run, heading directly for him, and I was right behind her, running in as fast as my legs could carry me. Once again, he tried to take a few shots at Titan as she approached, and again, most of them seemed to bounce off, at least the ones that hit, as she extended her blades just in time to catch him with another side swipe, this time from the opposite angle and direction. Once again, the impact sent him whirling for a moment, almost taking him off his feet, but once again he caught himself, and as he stood back up, once again, he wasn't going down. Was it not doing any damage at all? What the hell is this guy even made of? I thought to myself, staring at him. But as he stood up, I noticed that there seemed to be slight cuts in that thick skin of his, and that scorch mark on his shoulder seemed to be fairly deep. In fact, I could actually see small amounts of what looked like green blood dripping ever so gently from the places where Titan's blade had impacted. It wasn't cutting all the way through him, but it was doing some damage. And I'll tell you what, that skin of his is something else. To be able to absorb Titan's blows like that. Blades that'll cut right through armor plating on combat-equipped vehicles, and yet they barely scuff this guy. What the hell? I thought to myself as I charged in. No, I've got no time to think about it. If the blades are doing damage, then that's all that matters. Nothing lasts forever. If he can be hurt, then all I have to do is keep piling it on. Eventually, he'll go down. If it bleeds, you can kill it. He almost looked like he was going to regain his footing enough to take another shot at me before I reached him. Unfortunately for him, Emily was running back up exceptionally well. As expected, another round screeched out, nailing him just before I reached his general area, once again sending him stumbling, taking him off balance, and before he could get it back, I was already on the attack. I began slashing into him, one attack after another. It was like swinging a baseball bat against an iron wall. There was no give to him. The harder I hit him, the more I felt the impact in the handle. The more I could see sparks flying off of the blade as the warring of the saw kicked in, tearing into him, or at least it should have been. But still, just those sparks. Small cuts. Nothing deep enough to be really serious. If he were a human being, he'd been chopped into multiple pieces by the time that he finally started to respond, trying to take a shot at me that I fairly easily dodged. But I did note that it was faster than a regular human could have responded. And just like that, the battle began. It rapidly became a back and forth flurry, me slashing into him with the blade, Titan rushing by for surprise attacks, and Emily hitting him with shots to take him off his guard. As tough as he was, the assault we were laying down on him seemed to be fairly functional. He couldn't seem to catch his bearing through the assault. There were just too many targets for him. Don't get me wrong, he took his shots. He eventually figured out that shooting at Titan wasn't going to work, so he tried concentrating his fire on me, but found that I was a bit too difficult of a target to hit. But that didn't stop him from trying. After all, I wasn't made of steel. But with heightened reflexes and ability, I was able to avoid his shots, though they did come in much more effectively than I would have liked, some grazing just by, burning away small amounts of clothing as they passed. He was fast, too fast for a regular human, by a fairly wide margin. Even with Emily's shots ringing into him, my blade slashing away at him, and Titan taking those swipes as she passed, we weren't laying any serious damage in. Sure, he was bleeding, but everything seemed shallow, like paper cuts. And despite my enhanced brain, my physical body still had limitations. We had been going at it long enough that I was starting to get tired. My hands were beginning to hurt. I could dull the pain, but that didn't mean I wasn't experiencing it. Just because you turn your ability to feel pain off doesn't mean it goes away or heals. You're just able to ignore it. I need to hit this guy with something that he's not going to get back up from. I thought to myself, dodging yet another swing from his ungunned hand, feeling the whoosh of the air as it passed by me. Just because he didn't have a gun in it doesn't mean that that hand of his isn't dangerous. If his skin's as hard as steel, then I'd imagine getting hit with a mountain of muscle coated in solid steel is going to be fairly damaging. For all I know, it'll take my head clean off. It's best not to test the theory. I thought to myself, there's only one weapon I got, and I think is really going to do the job. At this point, Emily had put in her earpiece so that I could communicate to her through Titan's systems. It was a little thing we had worked out. I can communicate with basically anyone through Titan. Titan picks up my thoughts and then broadcasts them through radio wavelength. And like that, I began to work out a plan. I needed a specific amount of time, enough to get the weapon, put it together, and use it. But with the rate of this guy's attack and recovery, I needed something that would give me a fair amount of time, and only one thing would do it. Problem was, if I missed, then I had to last long enough to wait for the recharge. And this guy wasn't slow. Missing was absolutely an option. He was actually beginning to read my blade attacks fairly well, and was no longer getting hit by every one, making his own sets of dodges and evasions, even dodging Titan at times, and picking up on Emily's firing rhythm. So, in order to pull it off, we had to change our patterns up and line everything up just perfectly for a sequence of attacks ending in a successful hit. The first thing to go off was Emily's rifle, later than we expected it. I caught him glancing over, wondering when the shot was going to ring out. Her not shooting was actually beginning to distract him, and in the moment where he couldn't focus on whether to pay attention to where the shots were coming from or pay attention to me, Titan rushed in with an attack to the back end, slashing him across his back. Once again, sparks flying off of him, sending him forward a few steps, right into Emily's shot. This one hit him in the head, directly in the side of the face. He reached up with the hand that wasn't fused with a gun, holding his face tightly for a moment. His eyes squinted closed. The shot apparently blinded him, as well as possibly deafened him a bit. However it affected him, it didn't look pleasant, which was all good for me, because in the very moment that he started cracking those eyes of his back open, I pulled the trigger on my shield, swinging it in his direction, as the impulse wave fired off, impacting him. I could actually feel the reverberations from the energy. As it hit him, it almost kicked me back a little bit, sending off a powerful gust of wind as he went flying across the parking lot again, slamming into the back end of another car. As Titan rushed into position, right beside me, her handlebars moving, forming together, her armor flexing and bending, transferring out of position, as you could somewhat see the intricate movements of the parts within, everything rearranging itself to make the weapon accessible. And in just a few moments, it was ready. I grabbed the hilt, pulling up on the blade, as it lifted out of the center of Titan's form, the attached jets kicking off, helping raise aloft its massive form, the blades affixed to it beginning to spin up, the vibrations flowing down into the massive handle, that even as effective as we had made it, I still had to wield double-handed. All right, it's go time, I said, gripping Rocket Sword, as Titan's body formed back together, swallowing up my single-handed blade and the shield that I was using in order to fill out her weapons whilst I was using the sword. I could only hope that this would be enough to do the trick. Let's see how much that metal skin of his can take.